Hey, it's John, and welcome to the interview. Today, I'm joined by Haley Boehning, who is the co-founder and principal at Storyforge, which helps business leaders achieve the clarity and alignment necessary to tell and live meaningful stories so they can build brands that matter. Haley has decades of experience working with Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and startups to elevate storytelling and build differentiated brand positions. She's a regular speaker, lecturer, and author on the subject of storytelling, brand strategy, and conscious capitalism, all of which we'll be discussing today. Haley, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Let's just start with your background. How did you become to this point of becoming a human being? Give us your background, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Okay, thanks. Well, everything makes sense in hindsight. So this was not a logical progression for me, but I really have always been involved in storytelling in some way. I studied the great books of the Western canon, so Shakespeare, Plato, Aristotle. When I was in college, I studied theater and worked in theater in New York, directing, stage managing, acting, and at Playwrights Horizons, I did a couple of years there. So it's really been about the story and how to tell meaningful stories since the very beginning. I worked for a couple of years in Washington, D.C. as well for a nonprofit educational association. So all of that clearly preparing me for 16 years in the corporate world. I also do all my own stunts. That's probably something.
Wow. That's funny. Yeah, very cool. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about your current company, Storyforge.
Yeah, so Storyforge is a business we started back in 2014. My business partner, Barry Chandler, and I had been friends for a long time and had talked about business over glasses of whiskey or bottles of wine for years, and found ourselves finishing each other's sentences, which was curious because we really came from two very different backgrounds. So I have the arts background and the corporate background, and Barry is the serial entrepreneur building the businesses and selling them. But we had both come to the same conclusions and had some of the same insights about what makes businesses meaningful, what makes brands matter. And so we founded Storyforge with those beliefs in mind, hoping to help other businesses benefit from what the very large brands that we'd worked with had already come to realize, and what the smaller, super successful startups had known somehow inherently from the beginning.
Yeah. And what really motivated you to start it was, I mean, you'd mentioned your background in art and the arts and things like that. Was it just more of a passion that you guys came together on and just decided to go for it?
Yeah, it was a passion and I think a curiosity. So maybe those two things combined, a passion around the insights and the things that we had seen in the marketplace about businesses that felt really good to work for or to purchase from, and businesses that didn't feel great to work for or didn't feel great to purchase from, and wanting this kind of curiosity about wanting to understand what the similarities were. So we spent a couple of years really studying the marketplace, studying brands, some of the world's best brands, and trying to tease out what were those similarities or those things that those really great, meaningful brands had in common, brands that really mattered, and trying to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff there to determine what the formulas were that other businesses could apply.
Right. Creating stories and movements and things around their companies. Yeah, it's an important thing. It's not utilized enough or not understood enough for sure. So that's awesome that you're doing that. So take us through a day in the life of the founder there. I always like to ask this of people because I think a lot of people listening, they always like to hear how other CEOs spend their day or things like that. So maybe give us the Reader's Digest version of kind of your day. Like when you get up, what do you do? What does that look like?
Well, I would say every day is dramatically different, and that's by design. I think all of us in the business like to work on a variety of different projects. But typically, my day starts fairly early. We have clients all over the world, so I like to check in to see what my clients that are overseas have said or been doing while I've been sleeping. And then I usually start the day, like I say, a typical day in a partner meeting with my business partner, Barry. And we'll go over the clients that we're working on, touch on strategy, review some of the documents that we're producing for them, and then really look out into the future, 3 months, 4 months. What does our schedule look like? Where are we trying to fit in clients and projects? and think big picture about our business. What's our purpose? What's our vision? What are we trying to achieve? And how are we doing toward creating that for ourselves? So that's usually the morning. And then we do a lot of work via Zoom and video conference with our clients. We have clients all over the world. So we schedule those meetings when it works for other people's time zones. So I may have calls at very strange times of the day, strategy sessions with CEOs. I also sit on a couple of boards and committees. So often there will be board meetings or committee meetings with other business owners who are passionate about the same things I'm passionate about. And then if I can squeeze in a hike or a yoga class, then I know it's been a really successful day.
Yeah, you gotta sharpen the saw a little bit, right? So do you find that you take some time each day in your life to do a little something for yourself, for your body, for your mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. We, both my business partner, Barry, and I believe in work-life integration. The whole idea of work-life balance is an old and antiquated term that is unbelievably painful. That idea that there's going to be some kind of 50-50 balance between life just doesn't reflect the world that we live in today. It's much more about finding ways to integrate all of the different aspects and characteristics of your life into one day.
So what are some tips then on how to integrate, like, I guess define that a little more? Do you mean, because you're still blocking time for that activity, right? I mean, is there a certain tip that you can give people who are busy to take care of themselves a little more?
That's a great question. I think intentionality. One of the things I find that's so fascinating, especially in the A-type personalities that we often work with, business founders, entrepreneurs, is that they are so intentional when it comes to their business, sometimes scheduling down to the 15-minute increment, looking at their mission, their purpose, and their vision as a filter for thinking, and helping that filter help them prioritize how much time they're spending on each activity. And yet these same CEOs, these same disciplined entrepreneurs do not apply the same intentionality to the rest of their life.
Right.
So it's really trying to use the same skills and talents that make us great entrepreneurs and applying it to our personal life. So deciding, what are we trying to achieve? What's that vision for the world, for ourselves, that we're trying to help manifest? And then what are the very specific things that we're uniquely positioned to do to be able to enable that for ourselves?
Yeah, I love that word intentionality. I've been using that a lot more the last couple of years too. And that's really what it comes down to, because, we're the creators of our lives, and, it's about, I call it zooming out. Like, so, once a week, usually I'll zoom out and kind of look at what I call my big rocks. I don't know if you've heard the big rock story, but basically there's 3 big rocks. I don't know why it's always 3. I guess that's how our brain works, but, really zooming out and understanding the big picture of our lives, and are we accomplishing not just our business goals, but also our life goals too? Because at the end of the day, I used to work with a lot of elderly folks, and in their 90s, when I was in my 20s, and I asked them, what do you remember most about your life? And not a single one said, man, I wish I would have spent more time at the office. It's never the case. So
when work enables life, it's much more successful than the other way around.
Yeah. We work. What's the saying? You work to live, not live to work, kind of thing. So it probably doesn't feel that way sometimes, though. I get busy.
As you're saying the word intentional, it's occurring to me that the word tension is in the middle of that. There is always a tension. I think that's why the word balance doesn't feel right for me. There's a interesting thing. Have you ever done yoga, John?
Oh, yes. I've done half a yoga very poorly. I was the wobbling tall guy. I'm 6'3", next to the 90-year-old that was like stone. But yes, I've tried it.
You've clearly been to yoga then.
I've been to yoga.
Experience. Well, wobbling is a great description of what it feels like in yoga when you're trying to do balanced postures, right? I remember my first yoga class. I was completely new to it a couple of years ago, and I had this wonderful yoga teacher, and she said, okay, we're going to balance basically on one foot, right? Raise one of your legs, now balance on that one foot. And everyone in the class was falling over, just falling over. We were falling on our asses. And she said, look, that's a part of yoga, is falling. She said, but here's the thing about balancing. If you try to stand completely still and be incredibly rigid on that one leg, what's going to happen? You're going to fall.
Right.
Because balance, and this is why I don't like the word balance, balance implies that there's some end state that we want to get to and hold. There is no such thing as balance. But what there is such a thing as balancing. Because balance is a constant movement. It's why wobbling actually will keep you upright. And so, every once in a while, just as a trick for myself, if I'm really feeling stressed out, I try to stand on one leg. Not because balancing is somehow going to make me less stressed, but it's that insight that I had about work-life integration, and that it is a constant wobbling motion of trying to adjust. So remembering that there is no such thing as balance, there is only balancing, reminds me to say, you know what, today's a Monday, I'm a little stressed out, and I don't have anything on the calendar until 3:30. I'm going skiing.
Wow. There you go. Yeah, it's we could probably talk the whole time about this kind of stuff, but I guess one more and then we'll move on to some other topics. But how important is I don't know if you're familiar with the letting go philosophy. I can't remember the guy's name, David. I'm blanking on the name, but he has a good book called Letting Go. And it really shifted some things for me. Because I think we all want to try to control things, right? And it comes back to what we can control and can't control. But as a business owner, how important do you feel like letting go or really being aware enough to let go of certain things is to your own sanity?
Completely.
Yeah.
I think many of us as entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners, we like a sense of control. We're A-type personalities. Understanding what's in your control, what's your sphere of influence, and then what's out of your control is a really important first step to relieving some of that stress. There's a great author, she's a contributor to Fortune magazine and a coach named Reagan Walsh. I think it's reaganwalsh.com. And one of her articles last year for Forbes was, when you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? And that was a really important lesson for me as a business leader, to understand that the more I say yes to things, the more I'm saying no to, whether the no is right in front of me or whether the no might be coming in 2 weeks when I can't take on an additional project that I really, really want to work on because I've said yes to something that I don't really care to work on, but felt like I should. Yeah. So she also wrote an article called Shed Your Shoulds. So I try to remember that as well.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah. To the point you were just making.
Yeah, it's sort of the essentialist approach, right, to business and trying to, I mean, we could probably talk about that for a while, but any other books that you're reading right now that you want to recommend to people listening that you find help your life or your business, or just what's lighting you up right there right now?
Great question. I think an important thing for me, back to that idea of work-life integration, is a lot of the reading that I do in the evening before my Fitbit tells me it's time to go to bed is not a business book. So I am reading Conscious Capitalism's Field Guide right now, which just came out in the last couple of months, written by Raj Sisodia and a couple of other very smart people. It's like a practical application of conscious capitalism for business. And we're using it as the foundation for a roundtable series that we're teaching in Columbus, Ohio over the next year. So I'm reading that. That's my one business book. But last night I was reading Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends, which is a collection of poetry that most people think of as children's poetry. But there's some really great insights in there about business and what it means to be a human being and a good human being. And there's also a little comedy in there, which is never bad to inject into our lives.
Right. Do you find it's helpful to diversify your learning outside of business?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't trust people who just read business books.
Interesting.
If you spend all day reading business books, you're not really learning about the world. It's a little like my education at New York University in their Gallatin School of Great Books. We read the great books. If we were reading Dante's Inferno, we were reading Dante's Inferno. We might read 3 different translations of it, but we were going back to the actual book. And what are business books, if not third and fourth versions of somebody talking about an actual book, right? Or an actual experience that you can have in life. So I think as business leaders, there's nothing more important than the humanities for your degree and also for your own self-education after you leave your MBA or whatever your formal education is.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, very good. Very good. Let's shift gears and talk about storytelling, because I know that's your forte. So just briefly tell us why is it so important for a business to have such a compelling story?
Well, maybe I can tell you two things. One would be the business reason, and then the other is maybe the physiological reason. So the business reason is really clear. Today, each of us, John, you and I, every day, we are bombarded with about 5,000 messages.
Mm.
So in the 70s, it would have been 500. But today, it's 5,000 messages. And those messages are coming from really big companies like Procter & Gamble, and they're coming from really small companies like a local mom and pop shop or a young skincare company. They're all trying to get the same eyeballs and the same attention. And so if we don't have a way to stand out and to gain that attention, we're going to be lost in a sea of information. And if what we're putting out isn't relevant and meaningful, it's just going to be clutter and people are going to ignore it. I think you and I are probably the same. We go to websites and we don't read the banner ads. Do you? Do you pay attention to what's popping up, in your Facebook feed? Probably not, right? Unless it's relevant and meaningful to you. And
Right.
so relevance and meaning is really important. We know that 60% of marketing and advertising content that's being sent out today is valueless
Right.
to the very people that the marketing content is intended to attract. And so that's one reason businesses really need to pay attention is if you do not have a meaningful story, you can't cut through that clutter. So the physiological reason behind that is that we as humans are hardwired for stories. So since before the dawn of time, right? Since before we started writing on papyrus, we were telling stories. We were doing it in cave paintings, and we were doing it in dance, and we were doing it through song, or we were doing it through 4-hour-long epic poems, but we were telling stories. And the reason we were telling stories is because stories are more memorable.
That's right.
They get into our brain. I could give you a list of 20 things, and a week later ask you for those 20 things, you will remember maybe one of them. But if I tell you a story that includes those 20 items, you'll probably remember most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It triggers a different part of our brain and completely. And, as educators or business people, if you just list off cold, hard facts, people's eyes will glaze over. Or if you're trying to explain complex, here's the thing, I do a lot of in marketing as well, and sales. And, if you try to explain a complex issue with cold, hard features, people are having to think about it with their with the cognitive parts of their brain, and they don't want to work. It uses a lot of glucose. But if you can explain it through a story that's more pleasurable, you can tickle their crocodile brain a little bit more and really get them to see the big picture, because people filter information not through the thinking part of their brain, but more through the crocodile, the old reptilian part of their brain first, before they'll actually give the effort to actually think about something.
Absolutely.
So having stories to tell is like marketing gold,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that limbic brain. That's
Yeah.
our marketing friend.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read about John Wanamaker before. But
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah, he was a retailer in the days way before social media.
That's right.
His stores eventually became Macy's. But back in the late 1800s, he was very famous for saying that 50% of the money that he spent on advertising was wasted.
Right.
The problem was he didn't know which 50%.
Right. That's the famous saying. Yep.
Exactly. And we really haven't evolved that much since then. So we know 60% of marketing is valueless now. So it's gotten worse than it was in John's days, if he was the scientific method we should follow. But we also know that we've changed as consumers. We're much more savvy than we used to be. I think it's why we all like to watch Mad Men, because the advertising campaigns they come up with just look so quaint to us, right? Because you could tell people what to do then, and they might do it. Whereas today, we're not really interested in being told what to do. And as you said, we're not really responding to the rational part of our brain. We're responding to story. We're responding to beliefs. We're responding to things that are emotionally compelling, things that are aspirational, things that speak to us as human beings rather than as consumers. And that's where Story, if you can package those insights about who you are correctly, then you get directly into that reptilian brain, as you called it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and our attention is so fragmented too. The long tail theory is basically taken over, where everybody can like these little micro niches that they only like, and the relevancy is much more splintered these days than in the old days where you had 6 TV channels to watch or something like that. So being able to be relevant, as you say, with a good story, with something that jars emotion is crucial these days. And like you say, it's tough to execute. And I'm just curious, as a side note, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence and how to serve the appropriate relevant story? Have you studied much into that, or are you looking at that at all as a marketing vehicle to increase the relevance of marketing content?
What it brings to mind are the couple of experiments that have been done with AI to create movie scripts. If you've seen these, or television scripts or books, they are hilarious because they almost get it right, but it's very easy to see that a human didn't put it together. There is something in our brains that we haven't figured out yet, right? The human brain is a remarkable piece of technology that we have only become, we've only begun to understand about this much. I think tools, technology, whether it's AI or other things, are going to do great things for us as tools for storytellers and as tools for marketers. But I don't think they're going to replace good human storytelling.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like as a placement of a creative, kind of being a little more accurate there, I'm sure. But yeah, you're right. I don't think at this point, at least, a robot's going to tell a story as well as the human brain. So I get that. Cool. Yeah. So what are some of the things that make stories so inspiring? Like, what are some of the pieces of the story, if you want to walk through a big picture of that, that really help people tell better stories?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll focus on, because there are lots of different kinds of storytelling, but I think for your viewers, they're probably interested in business.
Yeah.
So brands and businesses, and what does it mean to have a meaningful story as a business? So I'll maybe narrow down on that. And we've found that there are a couple of common attributes to meaningful stories that businesses tell. The first one is simplicity. And this can be very difficult to achieve, but simple stories that are easy to understand and that consumers, employees, investors, all of your stakeholders can understand and then repeat back in their own words and their own language. That's a really essential attribute to a meaningful story. And this is where a lot of businesses get tripped up because we know way too much about our own businesses to be simple. So that almost always requires an editor, and that editor almost always has to be from outside of your business. So simplicity is the first one. The second essential attribute is emotion, emotionally compelling content, something that speaks to our hearts, something that speaks to us as human beings. So as you said, to that limbic part of the brain rather than the rational frontal lobe, right? We need things that are emotionally compelling, that speak to our aspirations as human beings, as people, as leaders, as employees, as whoever we are that we're speaking to. That emotionally compelling part is important. And then relevance is the next one. Understanding who you're speaking to, who are your stakeholders, who's your audience, and how is your story relevant to them? Really, that's where the hook comes in. Understanding what those stakeholders need, what they believe, making sure your story is relevant. And then the penultimate one is authenticity. Authenticity is really, really important, never more important than it is today, because we can see through your BS. Whoever you are as a business leader, whoever you are as a marketer or an advertiser, people have never been more savvy than they are today and never been more cynical. So making sure that the story that you're telling is authentic is another important step to being meaningful. And then the last piece, and the piece that people often misrepresent or overlook, is consistency. The consistent execution of a meaningful story for a business is the most important thing. It is the thing that will make your beautiful, gorgeous marketing or advertising campaign fall flat on its face, or worse yet, actually do significant damage to your brand or business if it's not consistently executed. And what do I mean by that? I mean, is the story that you're telling the story that you're living.
So it's more of an integrity, kind of a wholeness thing versus like a frequency thing. Like that's what you mean by consistency in this case.
Yeah, it's kind of both things. It's consistent execution over and over and over again, so which is more about frequency, and consistent execution across all aspects and touch points in your business. So I'll give you an example. If you had been in a coma for 20 years, and I woke you up this morning and I said, John, welcome back to reality. Before I explain what's happened to your family in the last 20 years, let me show you these two websites. And let me first explain what a website is. And then I'm going to show you Southwest Airlines website. And I'm going to show you United Airlines website.
Everyone's picking on United these days.
I pick it on them because they're easy to pick on.
They're easy to pick on.
But I show you these two websites and I say, I want you to tell me the story of these two businesses. So
Right.
you probably read the content on the website and say, well, they seem very similar, right? They talk about their customers and how much they care for their customers. They talk about integrity. They talk about customer service, right? They talk about all the good that they're doing in the community. These must be two very, very similar businesses. But I know you've flown a lot, John.
Yes.
Tell me, is there a difference between those two businesses?
Yeah. I mean, I just think the feel, I use Southwest quite a bit here out West, and they feel like, when you see their creatives or their videos, it's very fun and bright color and happy and personal, that kind of a feel. Whereas United would be more, corporate, kind of rigid kind of stuff. And, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a goofball, so I like to have fun. And so I resonate more certainly with the humanness, I guess would be the good word of that brand a little more.
Absolutely. Yeah, the difference really between them is that their original purpose for being was to bring humanity back to air travel.
Yeah,
so
makes
the
sense.
fact that you just used the word humanity means they did something right.
They did a good job.
And they're using that not just as a marketing campaign. It's not just about the marketing campaign and the fact that the baggage carts say, I've got baggage, right? And that's funny. It's not just about the fact that the flight attendants will wrap their way through the safety instructions. It's about using their purpose, their mission, and their vision as a filter for thinking about everything in the business. So the way they execute their meaningful story through their products and services means bags fly free. It means they always find ways to offer cheap, affordable air travel so that people can travel. It means that who they hire, how they onboard people, how those people go about and do their jobs are vastly different than United Airlines. It's not just a low-cost airline, and it's not just an airline with a great marketing campaign. They've really used that meaningful story to align their entire business.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, that's a good analogy or a good case example there for us to kind of illuminate what you were talking about there. So they also, I think they're big on simplicity too. I know that I've read they're a fascinating business to study. From a case study example perspective, I think they only flew the same. I don't know if it's 737s or 740. All the pilots can fly all the planes, all the parts to fix things, all work on all the planes. So they've really done a good job of in a lot of ways. But
Yeah. Well, and that's really the greatest insight that we've had about meaningful storytelling is exactly this, which is that a meaningful story is not about a marketing campaign. A meaningful story is about who you are as a business, what you stand for, what world you're trying to create, and then how you intend to go about doing that, and making sure that you're telling and living the same story at every step of the business. And that's why that consistent execution is kind of the final and hardest step of having a meaningful story, because it really touches every single part of your business. You can't delegate it. It's not just an annual campaign. You have to do it every single year in everything that you do to remain meaningful.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Thank you for that. That was very interesting for sure, and a good picture of what you're talking about and what you do as a professional too. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to touch on conscious capitalism for a second. I know that's part of some of these interviews I've been doing recently with board members or speakers at the conference and stuff like that. I'd just like to know pretty straightforward kind of how conscious capitalism has affected you as a company, as a leader, how it's helped you define a higher purpose and those kind of things.
Absolutely. Well, it is one of the few business books I've read in the last couple of years, in addition to Shel Silverstein. So when we stumbled upon Conscious Capitalism as we were beginning our business. We read the book and thought, oh, good, there are other people like us out there in the world. Other people who believe that business can be a great force for good in the world. So we were very fortunate. We banded together with a number of other business owners and CEOs here in Columbus, Ohio, where Storyforge is based. And we became a chapter. So we're one of the first 50 chapters, I think, of Conscious Capitalism around the world. And I'm delighted to serve as the vice chair of our board here and help our young community here in Columbus understand the principles of conscious capitalism and apply them to their business. So it's both been meaningful for me personally and meaningful for our business.
Absolutely. Very cool. So at this point in life, what are you most proud of, would you say?
Great question. I think at this point, one of the insights that I had along the way is that if we wanted to change the world and help people change the world in their own little pocket of their universe, that the thing that we had to do was help them have insights about how powerful they were, insights about how their business that they might have seen as just a business could actually be a force for good in the world and make great change. And so that's what I think I'm most proud of, is looking out across the world at all of the different businesses and CEOs that we've worked with in all of the different industries. And if we help them have insights about the power that they have to do good, then I know I have done good, and that the work that we've done can live on beyond just the project or the program that we work on with that company, but can affect people's lives.
Yeah. Is that how you kind of see your legacy? I know that I've been talking with people about their legacy and done a couple articles and interviews on it too. And I've had some people respond, they're like, they're not really sure what that means, or they kind of feel like that's for other folks to, I guess, project onto them, is kind of how people see their legacy. But how do you see that word, or how do you feel about that word?
Yeah, legacy is a big word. You know, legacy is something people often say about you when you're dead. So
Yeah.
So I think it perhaps makes people a little nervous because it sounds like maybe they're at the end of their career, because legacy is something that you think about in hindsight. Maybe a different way of thinking about it would be impact.
Impact.
What's the impact that I hope to have, or what's the impact that I think I've had? And I think if it can be insights, if it can be helping businesses become more meaningful. One of the other startling statistics, which I'm sure you've read, the updated numbers from Gallup last year were that I think it's over 74% of employees are not engaged in their work.
Yeah.
We're having a crisis of meaning right now in the world. People who want desperately to have and find meaning, but are spending most of the hours that they're awake and alive on this earth in offices where they don't find it. And that is incredibly sad to me. But yet I know people in lots of industries, people who make windows, people who build buildings, people who clean offices, who have found meaning in their work. And because of that, they're closer to happiness. They find joy every day. And that meaning is so incredibly valuable to them. So if I can maybe just have a little bit of an impact on helping businesses figure out how to be more meaningful to people and create businesses that really matter, then I'm pleased with what I've been able to do on this earth.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to find a little deeper meaning to our work as well too. Like you do a lot of work around story and video and creatives and marketing, but you look at it as more of a helping businesses show up in the world in a better way, and through that work impacting millions of people around the world. Is that kind of how you feel is Absolutely. The impact you want to make?
Absolutely. We want to build brands and businesses that matter. Because if we build brands and businesses that matter, it means that they're meaningful to people, meaningful to customers, and meaning to the employees, meaningful to their shareholders, to their investors, to their owners, and to the communities where these businesses operate. We have a wonderful business here in Columbus, Ohio, that you might have heard of, called Jenny's Splendid Ice Creams.
I haven't heard of that one.
Well, they're delicious, so you should look them
Sounds
up.
Like it.
I want to say they've got maybe 50, potentially 100 stores around the country. I might be overstating that, but I'd like them to be in every city. But Jenny's is a B corporation. They are a purpose-driven organization. They have a very, very meaningful story about who they are and what they believe. And about 2 years ago, they had a listeria crisis. I don't know if you know a lot about listeria, but it is a foodborne illness that can kill you. Now, Jenny's did not have listeria in their ice cream. Listeria was not found in their ice cream. Nobody got sick. No one was killed. But it was found on the floor of one of their factories. And so out of an abundance of caution, they closed their factory. They got rid of all of their ice cream, and they closed all of their ice cream scoop shops until they could investigate where this was coming from.
Wow.
And I walked past a Jenny's ice cream scoop shop in my neighborhood. And I was walking past one day, and I noticed that there were lots of little sticky notes on the front door. And the second day I walked past, and there were more sticky notes on the door. And I thought, that's a lot of UPS, delivery stickers. I should go check that out. So I walked over, and I realized they weren't UPS or FedEx delivery stickers. They were Post-it notes. And they were little colored pieces of paper that folks had taped to the door. And all of the notes said, Jenny's, we love you.
Oh.
Jenny's, when you come back in and you open your doors again, I'm going to buy 5 pints. Please don't go out of business. Please come back. We love you. It was their customers. The business and the brand was so meaningful that their customers were reaching out in the same way that you would with someone that might have been in the hospital.
I love that.
That to me was the sign of a business that has become meaningful for the people that they actually want to serve, literally and figuratively, and a wonderful demonstration of what that kind of love can mean.
That's awesome. That's a great story. You can tell your talent for story when you told that story right there. So that's beautifully put. Very good. Well, thank you for coming by, Haley, and sharing some insights on storytelling, conscious capitalism, your own work-life integration and not balance integration today. And anything you'd like to share to wrap this up, and then we'll call this good.
No, I think I just thank you for your time. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the International Conscious Capitalism Conference.
Yes.
I'll be doing a workshop on meaningful storytelling, so I hope you and some of your listeners will join us for that. And then people can learn more about Storyforge and what we do by visiting us at storyforge.co. And then just especially, I think, for your listeners, we also have a website called meaningfulstory.com, which is not a public website. You won't find it linked off of our website. But for your listeners, if they'd like to learn a little bit more about some of our programs that are uniquely positioned for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and small businesses, I would welcome them to visit that website and check us out.
Very good. And we'll link those up in the show notes of this video and audio version as well. And so make sure to check out Haley's good work over there. And very good. Well, thank you, Haley, for coming by again, and hope everybody enjoyed this discussion on storytelling, conscious capitalism, and a bit about the life behind Haley there. So thank you so much, Haley. I appreciate your time, and hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. I'll talk with you all on the next one. Take care.
Thanks, John. Bye.